Hi, I'm Josh, and August 2025 was a very active gaming month. I actually got a lot of very great quality gaming time in, and I also did a fair bit of video gaming on my old computer, so using relatively small, maybe sometimes older video games. However, in total, for the month of August, I am going to be talking about 8 video games, 5 of which are new to the channel, and 1 of which has an adjusted rating from the last time I talked about it. I did acquire 1 board game for the first time in a couple months, and I also have 8 board games to talk about. 2 of them are new to the channel, and 2 of them have adjusted ratings, because one benefit of watching my videos is you will see how games hold up with repeated plays over time, from my opinion anyways. So we're going to start out with the video games, going in order of the games that I have the most hours in to the ones where I have the fewest hours. So the one I played in August that has the most hours in is a video game called Thronefall, which I have 54 hours of playtime in at this point. I talked about it a fair bit in previous months and how much I enjoyed this tower defense style game. And I did continue to have a fair bit of fun replaying levels and exploring the game a little bit more now that I have unlocked all the weapons and perks that are available. And I did try to acquire more of the crowns by facing various challenges on each of the levels to try to complete those particular objectives, but I started to get frustrated in the fact that it ended up being very difficult, and it ended up being a fair bit less fun and more frustrating. So ultimately, I haven't actually played the game now in a couple of weeks because I feel like after those 54 hours, I have really enjoyed myself with the game. Definitely got my money's worth out of it. I rated it a 9 out of 10, and I'll probably come back to it now and then to dabble with it, but for the most part, I've worked my way through it and had a lot of fun with it, and don't see spending a whole lot of time in the future with it. This next video game is one that came up as a result of a conversation I had with one of my brothers. We were talking about an old game we used to play on the Amiga when we were kids called Empire, which was a very, very basic 4X style game where you basically start with one little city and you start producing armies, exploring the map. There aren't any resources per se to exploit, but what you're trying to do is locate your other opponents and destroy their capital cities and win the game that way. And when we got talking about it, I was like, there must be a version of this game out there somewhere. So I started doing a bit of searching, and ultimately what I found was a game on Steam called Empire Deluxe Combined Edition. It turns out this is a game that does faithfully recreate the original game, which I think the full name of the original game was Empire War Game of the Century or something like that. But it definitely is a faithful adaptation of that. But not only that, they have actually added a bunch of stuff in different ways you can play the game, where you can play the very simple basic game, or you can add in these other things that they've kind of put into the game, where they have all kinds of different units and different ways you can play the game. And so there's actually a lot more there to explore than with the original base game. And I think there's even a way where you can play an even simpler version than the original game too. But regardless, I started messing around with it, just playing against AI opponents. I think I played 3 games total, each time increasing the amount of options that were available to play with the game. And I found that the standard setting of AI opponent was super easy to defeat. It didn't provide much of a challenge, although I'm pretty sure that's adjustable. But having played it a few times against the AI, over the course of 16 hours of playtime, I have definitely had an enjoyable time dredging up that old nostalgia, and I'm not super anxious to play any more games against the computer, but I would love it if I could somehow get one or more of my brothers to pick up the game and maybe play online against them somehow and bring back those old childhood memories. So it was fun. This is kind of a game that occurred much in the same way where my nostalgic memories of Scorched Earth led me to pick up Shell Shock Live, which I've talked about previously, except for this is a more one-on-one recreation of the original with a bunch of stuff added onto it. So I rate this game an 8 out of 10 as just being a super fun, extremely simple 4X style game, maybe 3X if you don't count having to find resources, although with the other enhanced versions of the game, there are ways you can add resources to the game to make it a true 4X. The next one is Mini Motorways, which I talked about last month, I think. I have 14 hours into this game, and I've still been having fun dabbling with it, especially as you start to explore other cities and work your way through the different games that are available, because I started playing Zurich and was delighted to discover that they added tunnels as a feature to the game as well. So there's fun little stuff going on there. It's just a very simple route network creating game that I rate 8 out of 10 and continue to enjoy. This next one was new to me. It's called Bridge Constructor Medieval. And again, because I'm playing on my ancient Microsoft Surface Pro 1 computer that's about 12 years old now or so, I have to find these real simple low memory games to play on it, and this one was definitely ideal for that. It is a very simple yet surprisingly challenging puzzle game with a fun art style where you're using basic engineering to create bridges across this chasm. Most of the time you are just having to build a bridge that's sturdy enough to have your army march across it with a limited budget, which allows you to buy specific resources to create the bridge. And that's the challenge, where if you had an unlimited budget, unlimited resources, obviously you could build a super sturdy bridge, but you have these limitations that make it quite difficult. And as most other people who have reviewed the game on Steam have stated, the most fun levels are the ones where you actually want your bridge to collapse, because the enemies in these levels are coming the other direction, and you want the bridge to be just sturdy enough that your enemies will get all onto the bridge before it gives out and collapses and destroys your enemies. So that's an even more fun challenge than just trying to create a sturdy enough bridge to get your army across. And I ended up completing the campaign in a little over 10 hours. And just like with Thronefall, I went back to some of the levels where I didn't complete the higher level challenges and started to try to accomplish those. But once again, even though this game looks very cartoonish and easy, even just getting the basic level rewards for each of the levels was pretty challenging, and trying to get those higher ones was mostly quite frustrating. And so I don't think I have the patience to try to go back and get the crowns that I get from completing all levels on the higher levels of difficulty. So I don't expect I'll ever 100% finish the game due to how extremely difficult those are, but I certainly had fun for those 13 hours of playtime and just the couple dollars I paid for the game. So definitely one that I enjoyed for a little while. Next, I got back to a game called Dredge, which I now have 12 hours of playtime into. This is a fairly relaxing fishing game, but with a kind of creepy horror theme where there's mysterious and unsettling things going on in the background. I found myself getting back to this game after Wyatt discovered it thanks to our Steam family plan. All of a sudden he had access to a bunch of the games that I purchased, and he decided to play it a bunch. So I thought, maybe I should get back to that game again. And I did finally venture out away from my little home island and discover some cool new biomes. But over time I found the process of fishing or dredging and then selling the things that I collect to upgrade my boat begins to feel pretty samey after several hours of play, slightly tedious even. And so I've decreased my rating very slightly from originally an 8 out of 10 to now a 7.5 out of 10. However, the overall game design with its spooky atmosphere and mysterious storylines seems to be very well done as far as I can tell, not having actually completed the game. So I do think it still deserves quite a high rating, even if the slightly repetitive gameplay might knock it down slightly. But overall, it's a really well done game. The fun I had playing that Empire game prompted me to pick up a game called the Battle of Polytopia when it went on sale. This is another game in that 4X light genre that I remember playing some years back on my phone a little bit. So I thought this might be a nice step up from the very, very basic stripped down gameplay style of Empire to something that has some really cool visual art style and maybe a little bit more involved gameplay, a little bit of tech advancements in various areas. And while all that is true, the visuals are great and the gameplay is nice and quick and simple. After playing it 4 times over the space of 4 hours, I'm not feeling myself super excited to get back to the game. even though it does offer a seemingly large amount of different nations to try out to play the game in different play styles, really, as far as I can tell, all it means is each of the nations has a different starting technology, which doesn't switch up the game all that much at all. Although perhaps they do come with different maps to play on, which maybe adds a bit more variety, but I ended up getting kind of bored with this game pretty quickly, and so it's not a terrible game, but I guess I was just a little bit disappointed by how the game presented versus how it ended up playing out. I'm giving this game a rating of 5 out of 10 as kind of being that middle of the road. There's good stuff going on, but I'm not super excited by it overall. This next one was new to me, and it was inspired by how much I have enjoyed playing Mini Motorways, and this is Mini Metro. So they've taken this simple route connecting game, Mini Motorways, that was based on connecting car roads and highways and so forth, and turned it into a train game where you have different train lines that have to deliver passengers to different areas. And I had read that this was even better than Mini Motorways, and well, it's true that it does seem to be a bit more complex and challenging. It feels like there's a bit more going on. For me, this didn't translate into being a more fun experience. Overall, I found I've preferred to play the original game because of its slightly more straightforward, more chill vibes. Although I only have 3 hours of play into Mini Metro, which I think was 3 plays of the game. There was something that just didn't quite click with me. The user interface I found a little bit more difficult to work with. And although I do think Mini Metro is maybe a more clever game design, overall I just found Mini Motorways to be more fun. So I've given Mini Metro an initial kind of first impressions rating of 6.5 out of 10. I don't really think I'll experiment with it much more. I think I'd probably rather just play Mini Motorways at this point. Then the final game I got back to was a classic Jackbox party game. This was the Jackbox Party Pack 7, which I played for a little over an hour with family members. Chances are you're familiar with these fun Jackbox party games, which allow a group of people to sit in front of a screen with their phones and play these very fun and hilarious games together. I haven't played the Party Pack 7 before. I have played a few of the other ones in the past, and I found that Party Pack 7 did have an excellent selection of games that, like all the rest of them, provide a lot of laughs and, even more hilariously, the occasional broken friendship. But in terms of just really simple party games, you don't get much better than this. This is a 9.5 out of 10 for me. Yes, you do have to play it on a phone and with screens, which for some people can maybe be a bit of a negative point, but on the other hand, everybody can just get comfy on the couches and just play a fun game together and have some laughs. So what it does really well, I think. Now, to get to the board games, the one board game that I did acquire, I picked up used from a game auction that was being held by a somewhat local-ish Southern Ontario gamer here, and that is the game Doggerland. I've mentioned in the past that I'm always a sucker for these prehistoric themes, and through slightly serendipitous coincidence, I was thinking recently how once I've sold off the games that I currently have in my for sale pile, I don't think I'm going to have any games on the shelf that are based around the worker placement style mechanism, which is unfortunate, but Doggerland is very much based around worker placement, and it looks like a really fun game. In fact, as I record this, I have the game set up on my table downstairs, and I'm partway through a solo play of it, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So you'll definitely be hearing more about it when I talk about my games played in September. Getting now into the games that I played in August, in order of my lowest rated games to my highest rated games, we have a game called Small World, which, while it is a board game, I played it on the Steam version on my computer, so I played it in digital format. I had picked this game up for just a couple bucks when it was on sale a while back, so I finally got it played. I played 2 solo games on the Steam version, and I have played the physical board game years ago, and I recall thinking that the game was just okay when I had played it at the time, and sure enough, when I went back to check my BoardGameGeek ratings, I saw that I had rated the board game a 6 out of 10 way back in 2014, more than 10 years ago. So Small World is a highly tactical game with very little luck, very simple rules that has you taking these various fantasy races, conquering territories, then your civilizations kind of go into decline. You pick up another race and try to spread across the board again in this sort of ebb and flow format. And after getting back to the game for the first time in over 10 years, I feel that it is an okay game. The artwork is really cute. The game is simple and quick to play, but I think my rating does remain the same as it did at that time, just a 6 out of 10. Although I did maybe want to pick up the Small World of Warcraft version, because that version of the game apparently has a couple of interesting little tweaks to the system, and I thought the theme might appeal to my younger son Wyatt, but when I showed it to him, he wasn't overly interested. I guess he's more of a Warhammer 40k theme type of person than a World of Warcraft person. So probably won't be messing around too much more with Small World on Steam there. Next up is a game called Flip 7, which I and many other gamers have been talking about in recent months. It's a very simple push your luck game based slightly on the blackjack format of either taking a card or passing and taking your points. I ended up having two very fun family events in August. First, one of my younger brothers came over for a couple of days with his partner, her son, and a couple of his kids, and along with my kids, we had a really great time playing a bunch of these games that I'm going to be talking about here. And then later in August, we did our annual uncles and cousins camping trip where myself, my three younger brothers, and a bunch of our kids went camping for a couple of days, which has been a tradition that we've been doing every summer for a while now, although as some of the kids grow up and get summer jobs, the number of people that attends becomes fewer and fewer every summer. But as somebody who doesn't really have a social circle per se, I will say I do have three amazing brothers in my life. They have wonderful partners. I love all their kids to death. I have just the best nieces and nephews. So we all have a really great time when we get together. We play a lot of games and have a lot of fun. So Flip 7 was one of the games that got played in both of those occasions. When my brother's family was here, I played at 4 players with a few of us. And then at camping, I played it a few more times with 5 to 7 players. And what's interesting is the more I play Flip 7, the more boring I find it and the lower the rating goes. So I started off with this game rating it 8.5 out of 10, then I lowered it to 7.5 out of 10, and at the end of August I decided to lower it again to 6.5 out of 10, which is not a terrible rating. It's a fun game. It's okay, but there's just not much to it. And the more I play it, the more I end up wanting to buy a game called Can't Stop, which is a similar push your luck game, but for me has more interesting choices going on. Although the real advantage of Flip 7 over some of these other push your luck style games is that it can handle a pretty high number of players without taking an overly long time. So I enjoy the push your luck mechanism. I enjoy several of the games that employ it, but Flip 7 hasn't been holding up with repeated plays for me anyways. Next up, at the camping trip, I played a 3-player game of For Sale with myself, my older son Evan, and my youngest brother. And this is a game that I also dropped the rating of ever so slightly, because when I played For Sale, I felt like I was playing a poorer version of a game called Biblios, which is a game I'm going to be talking about a bit later in this video. And if it weren't for the fact that I haven't tried it yet with the Advisors expansion, this would go on my pile of games to sell. However, I have a suspicion that the Advisors expansion might boost my overall impression of the game if I do get a chance to try it out sometime. Hopefully that'll happen at some point. I'm not sure when, but it looks like it could make the game slightly more interesting. At this point, I've dropped my rating from a 7 out of 10 to a 6.5 out of 10. In the past, when I played it with my sons, my younger son Wyatt had given it a 5 out of 10, and Evan had given it a 7.5 out of 10. Next is a dexterity game called Klask 4, which is the 4-player version of a game called Klask, which was originally made to play with 2 players, although I only played it 2-player with one of my nephews. And once again, it made me wish I had gotten the regular Klask, which is the 2-player only version, because the 4-player version without exactly 4 players, doesn't play super well. It's a really cool little design where you got these magnets under a wooden board that are controlling your piece on the board to try to hit a ball into your opponent's goal. And I thought that the 4-player version might be offer more flexibility in play, but overall it's just, I don't think, quite as good a game as the original Klask. I do rate it 7.5 out of 10. It's a fun little dexterity game, although there are other dexterity games like Crokinole, which I do enjoy more. A new to me game is up next called Wavelength, which is one I picked up a little while back and have been waiting for an opportunity to play. Finally got that opportunity when my brother's family came over, and one of my nieces had mentioned that she's seen people playing this game on TikTok, I guess. But anyways, it's a fun team game of word guessing, and it has some similarities to a game I talked about, I think last month, called That Escalated Quickly, where you're given sort of this range of, I don't know, there's this range that you have to get people to guess into. It's cleverly created with this really cool mechanism that has a screen with a dial on it and such, and it's a challenging game for the clue giver on the team. The person has to come up with just the perfect clue to get your team to guess where on the scale they're trying to get you. And so it can be a bit tough, but it's also pretty fun. I rated it a 7.5 out of 10. It's not a top tier party game for me, but it is a good time. A party game that is slightly better, in my opinion, is Just One. We played 2 rounds with 6 to 7 players, again with my brother's family, and we ended up doing pretty well because we just all seemed to be on the same wavelength. Speaking of wavelength, I rate Just One an 8 out of 10. Evan had given it an 8 out of 10. Wyatt had given it a 7 out of 10. So it's definitely a more popular game than some of the others I've been mentioning here. An even more popular party game is Telestrations, which once again I played with 6 to 7 players with the same group. This game based on drawing and trying to guess pictures, in which being a bad drawer actually makes for a more funny experience a lot of the time. It's always good for a laugh. Although, once again, we did surprisingly well at identifying each other's drawings too, so there's a lot of simpatico thinking going on here. And Telestrations is a game I rate 9 out of 10. It's always good for a group of about 6 to 8 people or so, and provides a lot of laughs. And then the best of the month is Biblios, which I mentioned a minute ago. A handful of months ago, I did get Biblios out for the first time in years to play with my kids. And once again, I got it out at camping and played 3 players, once again with Evan and with my youngest brother. And it was enough of a hit with my youngest brother that we ended up playing it 3 times. As is often the case, you don't necessarily see how everything works together on the first play, but then you go, oh, I think I see how this works. Let's play again and see how things go. So we had a lot of fun with it. I'm just super impressed with Biblios as a card game. 3 players is the sweet spot. I would say 4 players is probably second best. Really don't think it's a great game for 2 players, but if you have those 3 or 4 players, Biblios is just so clever, so well done. I rated a 9 out of 10. Evan has given it an 8 out of 10. Wyatt didn't enjoy it all that much, though. When we played it that one time, he gave it a 5 out of 10. And my youngest brother gave it a 7 out of 10. He enjoyed it, but it's not a top tier game for him because of my 3 younger brothers. He is definitely the most hardcore gamer along with myself, and so he enjoys these more complex Euro style and even some of the more thematic style games he enjoys a lot, but he enjoys the mental puzzles, I think, that board gaming provides. And this was light and fun, and he rated it accordingly. But yeah, I really like Biblios a lot. And that was my gaming for August. A lot of wonderful family time, which I enjoyed a ton. What about you? How has your summer been for gaming? Have you been playing anything particularly fun? Have you gotten anything new that you're excited to try out? I would love to hear all about it if you get into the comments, and I just really appreciate you watching. Cheers. Hi, I'm Josh. August. It turns out this is a game that does faithfully recreate, which I now have 12 hours of into. It's definitely the best of the. There were a few, or maybe, obviously he's more of a.